Hi, and welcome. So glad that you're joining us for our Christmas series. Woohoo! It's Christmas! I'm so excited. Now, I know that's been a little bit controversial this year. 2020 has been so, awful, really. And there were some people who were just like, I'm so over 2020 that as early as November the 1st, they were setting up their Christmas trees and like, hey, it's time for Christmas and some joy and some happiness. But hey, listen, we are really there now. Thanksgiving has happened. Macy's Day Parade, right? And Santa and his 8 tiny reindeer have already come in and ushered in the Christmas season. You know, I love Christmas. And there are some things that just make Christmas Christmas. Christmas trees, for example, right? The lights, presents. I mean, those things are great. But there's one thing that, well, it's just special. And really, it's one of those things that Christmas just really wouldn't be Christmas without it. The music. We all know the Christmas songs. We hear them wherever it is that we're at this time of the year, and we instantly know that it's Christmas time. And let's be honest, those songs, there's something special about them, something borderline magical about them, because they just seem to embody this joy and peace and hope and love of the season of Christmas. Well, this series is all about Christmas songs. Some of the sounds and the things that we hear this time of the year. In fact, we're going to talk about 4 different Christmas songs, and I'm really excited to do that as we look at the meaning behind these songs, the stories of them, and some of the importance of the lyrics of these songs. In fact, you might even call them carols, if you will. Now, this first one that we have is, it's a favorite. In fact, it's one of many people's favorites. And it was a favorite right from the very time that it came out. But instead of me telling you what the song is right off the bat, how about I tell you a few things about this song, and why don't you see if you can figure it out? And if you figure it out, why don't you just type it in? And let's just make it a little bit more fun and more interesting. If you're the first person to type it in, then we'll send you a fun Christmas present just to say congratulations for getting this song right. Our song today was written in the mid-1800s. Any guesses yet? Just kidding. But it was commissioned by a parish priest. And this priest had a poet that was in his town, a French merchant actually, that was also a poet. And he reached out to him because he wanted a poem written about the Luke 2 story. And so he asked this man, his name was Placide Cappeau. And he asked Cappeau, he said, would you be willing to set the Luke 2 story to a poem? Cappeau was excited about the challenge of this, and so he graciously accepted. Now, the interesting thing about this is not the fact that Cappeau accepted the challenge, although that's a little bit interesting of itself, because you see, Cappeau was not a Jesus follower. In fact, he was so much not a Jesus follower that he was actually known in town as a hellraiser. He was kind of anti the church and everything about it. But he was excited to try to write a poem about this epic story. And then he got so excited about what it was that he composed that he reached out to another one of his friends who also was not a Jesus follower and asked him if he would set the poem to music. And then they presented the project back to the priest at the parish. And the priest loved it, and they performed it for the very first time on Christmas Eve. It wasn't long after that this poem/song was a part of every church in the surrounding area. In fact, over the next couple of years, it grew in popularity and was almost as popular then as it is now. And then the Catholic Church found out who the composer and who the original lyricist was, and they tried to shut the song down. They were like, no more, can't have it anymore. Those two guys they're not followers of Jesus at all, and so we can't use this song. But it was too late because the song had too much popularity. Here's another interesting fact or story, if you will, about this song. Nearly 5 decades later, on Christmas Eve of 1906, a Canadian professor by the name of Reginald Fissenden did what most people thought was never possible. He walked into his garage and he hooked up a homemade generator and he plugged in a microphone. And into that microphone, he began to read the words of Luke chapter 2, verse 1. It says this: "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world." And he continued to read the rest of the Christmas story. It's what's now known as the very first AM broadcast. It's the first things that ever went out on a radio frequency for all people to be able to hear. But he didn't stop just at reading the Christmas story. You see, immediately after Reginald finished reading the story, he took out his violin and he began to play this song that we're going to talk about today. And it was the very first song that was broadcast over AM frequencies. Still not sure what it is? You know, it's okay, because we've got a very special version of this song that we're going to play for you in just one moment. So sit back, relax, and let's get ready to learn together as we gather, grow, and go.
The stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long live the world in sin and terror pining, till He appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices, oh night divine, oh night when Christ was born. Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices, oh night divine, oh night when Christ was born.
I can only imagine what it would have been like to be there on that night in the manger scene. The manger scene has a lot of emotions, at least for me, tied up in it. Maybe it's because as a kid, my mom had a white Avon porcelain nativity scene that it set up on the mantle every year at our house. And one year, my brother and I were messing around, and we caused some pieces to fall off of the mantle. I mean, who knew that a porcelain angel can't fly? But he does make really good angel dust afterwards. At least that's all that was left of him and a few other items. Thankfully, Mary and Joseph and the baby were safe and unharmed, but I certainly had to replace a lot of pieces from that original Avon set. I had to replace a couple of wise men, the angel, some camels, and of course no nativity scene is complete without some cows that are lowing. Who even knows what lowing really means? I don't know. But they were there, those cows that were lowing, and they are part of my mom's Avon scene. And so for me, the nativity has a lot of emotions that are attached to it. Maybe it does for you too. But I think that manger scene that we picture and that we see, right? This white porcelain, pristine sort of a look that is what comes to my mind when I think about it. It does this huge disservice because we miss some of the elements about what it really would have been like and what would have been happening on that night. I mean, here it is, this teenage girl who is impregnated by the Holy Spirit. All right, that's a whole different conversation, not for today, but that's what it was. And then she's got her fiance who is probably a young adult, maybe even an older teen himself. And here it is, they are traveling on donkey in order to get to where it is that Caesar Augusta has declared that they have to go and be at for this census record. I don't know, but could you imagine? Could you imagine being 9 months pregnant? Could you imagine Megan right now, you and Caleb walking into the room and saying to you, hey, sweetheart, I know that we're supposed to have this baby any day now, but we have to travel to Flagstaff on donkey. Let's do it, right? I'm sure that's exactly the reaction that you would have. I remember our first child, and we were just 5 minutes away from the hospital. Just 5 minutes, that's it. And we were going to take the Chevy Avalanche, which, I mean, you want to talk about like luxury truck ride sort of a thing. There's nothing that was bumpy about riding in that Chevy Avalanche. Although I did learn that because you have to climb up and in, that when a contraction hits and you're pushing your wife up, you're going to get smacked in the head. Just a fair warning for anybody else who might have a truck that you lift your wife up into when they're having a contraction. Don't do it. Wait. Just be patient. Anyway, so we were just 5 minutes away, and we got the elevator speech when we got there to the hospital. Any of you ever gotten the elevator speech before? Well, it goes something like this. Don't have the baby in the elevator. That's what they say to you as they're there. Like, whatever you do, don't have the baby in the elevator. They're clicking the buttons as quick as they can. Don't have the baby in the elevator. And then up the floors we went. Well, obviously my daughter came out. She was great, and everything worked out fine. But here it was, Mary and Joseph were traveling by donkey somewhere between 80 and 120 miles in order to get to their destination. And then when they got there was no place for them to stay, right? The family was all booked up that was there. All of the other places to be able to stay were all booked up because everybody had to come back to their hometowns, the places where their families were from. And so the only place that was available for Mary and Joseph that night was to go to the stable. And most scholars agree that this was most likely just a giant cave, if you will, a place that was a shelter for the animals to be able to get out of the wind and the rain and the snow. It had a little bit of hay and certainly a lot of feces. Yeah, I just said poop. There was poop all over the place. There were animals there. It wasn't a sanitary environment in order for them to have a baby in. It wasn't there. And not only that, there was no epidural that was going to be given. So here it is, you have this teenage girl that was about to give birth, and there was probably screaming that happened. You know, I remember my second child when she was born, and when we got to the hospital for her, and as we were going up the elevator, again, getting the elevator speech, don't ask me why I have this problem of getting the elevator speech 2 times in a row. You'd think I would learn after the first one, but I didn't. And so here it was, we're getting the elevator speech again, and my wife is saying to them over and over again, I want drugs, I want drugs, I want drugs. Saying that she wanted an epidural. She knew how close it was that she was to having this baby. And I remember the moment when the nurse looked back over at her and said to her, honey, I'm sorry, there aren't going to be any drugs. We're about to have this baby. And I remember that moment so clearly because I was pretty sure that it was going to be my last moment here on this earth. As my wife looked over at me and gave the death stare as only can be given when a woman has just found out that there is no epidural and that she's about to have natural childbirth. And as the nurse is saying to her, push. I don't think that my wife breathed for the next 5 minutes. And the reason I don't think so is because I'm pretty sure I didn't breathe for the next 5 minutes as she squeezed my hand and as I tried to coach her through this incredibly painful experience of childbirth. We've been through this 3 different times at this point. And there's a couple of things that I've learned in the child birthing experience. The first thing that I've learned is that I'm a total zero in this moment. I don't know what it is that happens, but it doesn't matter which story you want to go to, whether it's our first child, our second child, or our third child. There is some boneheaded thing that I do in the midst of this moment. I don't know if it's just that logic and reason leaves the building when a child is about to be born. I don't know what it is, but needless to say, it doesn't matter who tells you the story, whether it's me or whether it's my wife. At the end of the day, I am a zero inside of these stories. Here's the second thing that I know. Stephanie is an incredible hero in all of these stories, right? I mean, from the moment of, hey, you had to go through childbirth with no epidural whatsoever. Oh my goodness. Can't even begin to describe how much of an amazing heroine she was for all of that. But to things that you always wish that you would say to people, these are the sorts of things that she has in this moment. For example, on one of them, they asked her to pee in a cup as she was going through intense contractions, and she looked over at the nurse and she said, you pee in a cup. I'll do that after we have this baby. We're getting this baby out of here right now. Boom, mic drop, right? That's what everybody always wants to be able to say and that sort of thing. So I'm telling you that the 2 things that I've learned is, number 1, I'm a zero, and number 2, Stephanie is the hero of the story and all of those. But here's what happens in the midst of this scene of the nativity is that we have so completely whitewashed some of the things that happened there, and we forget that it's real humans that are there. And Joseph was probably just as boneheaded as I am, but definitely Mary was an incredible hero in this moment. But she was probably screaming out loud, and it wasn't anywhere near clean or sanitary. It was gross and disgusting. So here it was, the night of Jesus's birth. I mean, it was chaos. It's screaming, it's panic. And all of this is going on inside of this little cave as Mary is giving birth to the Son of God. Now in this song, O Holy Night, there's a phrase that I really want to zero in on. That's really kind of what we're going to do in this entire series, right? Now I'm going to pick out some phrases, and they may seem a little bit unlikely to you, but I really believe that every time that you hear this song and that you worship through this song again, that these are going to just jump out to you, and you're going to remember the holy moments that we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks. So, here's the phrase that I want to look at today. The song says, "A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices." Could all of you just say 2020? Right? I feel like this song might be talking about 2020. A weary world, right? If there are two words that accurately describe our world today, I would definitely say that it's a weary world. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it's just overwhelming. There's so much anxiety. Everything that's going on in the economy and politics and the divisions that exist, relationships are all messed up, families are struggling, and then on top of all of that, there's COVID, right? It's almost like we're fighting to stay above the water. And I think just so many people relate to the words today, a weary world. But you know what I love is that the song says that there's a thrill of hope. Can you imagine in the chaos of this holy night, a thrill of hope that maybe, just maybe, and those who were putting their faith in God for centuries had hoped that one day the Messiah would be born. And on that day, everything would be different forever and ever. Can you hear that kind of faith? That's a thrill of hope. And suddenly the weary world does what? The weary world rejoices. You know, I pray that God, that if there's any weary world in you, that you'll experience a thrill of hope this year inside of your weary world, and you will find the faith that you need to rejoice. Why? Here's the next line of the song. "For yonder breaks a new and glorious morn." You see, even in the chaos of this night, there is a new and glorious morning. And every time, as you move forward, I want you not to just think about that holy night, but I want you to think about what happens the next day when the sun comes up. The Savior has been born. And on the new and glorious morn, everything is different because it's a day with Christ. And a day with Christ can change everything. Everything. In fact, let's just zoom in for a moment. Let's focus in on what this new and glorious morning is like. Here's what I want to do. I want to take you back to the Old Testament. I want to take you to the book of Lamentations. I know probably not the first Christmas chapter and book that you would think about, but the book of Lamentations. Now here's the context. The year is 586 BC. Jerusalem has just fallen, and the people, they're as distraught as you could possibly imagine. It was their 2020. And here it was, the prophet Jeremiah. He was lamenting, hence the name of the book. And he was whining, he was hurting along with everybody else, and he just pours his heart out, full of hurt inside of this text. And then in chapter 3, we see this switch where he moves from mourning to a moment of, well, I think the best way to describe it is a moment of faith. I love what he says. Read with me in chapter 3, verse 20. It says this. "And I will remember them, and my soul is downcast within me." So in other words, Jeremiah is not just putting his fingers in his ears, closing his eyes, burying his head in the sand. No, I don't know what's going on. No, instead, here's what he's doing. He's acknowledging that there's some sort of significant life-altering difficulties. They're surrounding him. But check out what happens in verse 21. He goes on and he says, yet I will call to mind. And therefore, in other words, I'm going to have something because I call this to mind. Therefore, I have hope. I love this. He says, I'm going to call it to mind. I know that it's there. It's not really here at the front of my mind. You know, it's kind of like somewhere way back here. It's like on the tip of my tongue. I just can't quite get it out. But I'm going to call it up to the front of my mind. And I'm going to remember this truth. And I'm going to remember this truth so that I will have hope when nobody else does, because I know that this thing is true. I'm going to call it to mind, and it's going to give me hope. And here's what it is. He says, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. His compassions never fail. And don't miss what he says next about God's compassion. He says that they are new every morning. Now, the next little bit, he kind of loses himself and he really just starts talking to God. I mean, he's talking about God, and then he just goes to God and starts talking to God. And he says, God, great is your faithfulness. Great is your faithfulness. And then he says, and I remind myself, I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him. To the one who seeks him, it is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It's amazing what a new day with Christ can bring. And I want to show you 3 truths straight out of this text that I think can fill you with a thrill of hope when your weary world is in darkness. Here it is. If you're taking notes, thought number 1. A new day with Christ brings exactly what you need. Every day with Christ will bring you exactly what it is that you need. Now, I didn't say what you want, and I have a 5th grader and a 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old at this point that are looking at Christmas stuff, and I have to constantly remind them that there's a huge difference between what they want and what they need. Sometimes these things even get confused in our own world. Look back with me at Lamentations 3:24. Jeremiah says this. He says, I say to myself. Now, how many of you know every now and then you just have to talk to yourself a little bit. You just preach some truth at yourself, right? It's something that you've just got to be the best preacher around. There's nobody else to be able to do that. And you just open up God's word and you have to call it to mind. And you say to yourself, you remind yourself of the truth of God's word. And you have to, I say to myself. And Jeremiah said, the Lord is my portion. Therefore I will. I will what? I will wait for him. The Lord is my portion. What does that really mean, Pastor Charles? I mean, when you say that, what is it supposed to mean? Well, there's a lot of different answers to that particular question, and depending on who you talk to, you may get some sort of different answer, but most scholars generally believe, and I tend to agree with them, that this is referring back to the time when Israel was in the desert. They were wandering around. In fact, they spent almost 40 years in the desert, 40 years. And God provided for them their daily portion of heavenly manna. In other words, every day they would wake up and out on the ground, there would be enough food for them for that day. And they would take it and make some pancakes or sort of bread out of it. But if they tried to hoard the food, right, hold some back for the next day, it would have like worms in it. It just wouldn't last. It would rot and be gross and disgusting. And they had to go out and get exactly what it is that they needed for the next day. And God was trying to teach them that they would have everything that they needed every single day from him. You know, in the New Testament, Jesus, when he was talking to his disciples, he told them, here's how to pray. He said, pray for your daily bread. In other words, God, every single day I need this, and I need this to come to mind, that you are my daily portion. That's exactly what I need. And the great news is, and the thing that I really want you to understand is that God is already in tomorrow, and he already has everything that you need for tomorrow too. Whatever it's going to bring. He's already there. So if your marriage is struggling in today, what I hope that you'll understand is that God is in tomorrow, the new and glorious morn, waiting for you, because he is exactly what your marriage needs. If you're weak today, right? God is already in tomorrow. And his strength is made perfect in your weakness. Maybe you're down and you're depressed today. But I want you to hear that God is already in tomorrow. And He's your joy, and He will be the lifter of your head. Because a new day with Christ always brings exactly what you need. And exactly what you need is the presence of God. His reality, His strength, His power, His goodness. I say to myself, therefore the Lord is my portion, and I will wait for Him, because a new day with Christ brings exactly what we need. All right, here's the second truth. And I hope that this one ministers to you the same way that it ministers to me. A new day with Christ brings us the hope to keep going. So a new day with Christ brings the hope to keep going, right? It's that thrill of hope in the weary world. It's a thrill of hope and faith when all we see is darkness. It's the belief that there is a new morning that's coming in the middle of the chaos of the night. Verse 25 of Lamentations 3 says this: the Lord is good to those whose what? Whose hope is in Him, to the one who seeks Him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in Him. You know, someone said this once, and I think it's pretty interesting, and you should take note of these sort of ideas. But as people, we can only live about 40 days or so without food. We can live 8 days or so without water, and we can live about 4 minutes without oxygen. But how long can you live without hope? Not very. In fact, it's been suggested just seconds, that the moment that somebody gives up hope, that it's all over. You know, I believe that there are too many people today who are trying to survive with a very hope-deprived life. They're struggling to find the right places to put their hope into. In fact, really, if they're honest, they've been placing their hope in all of the wrong places. Some of you may be one of those people, and right now your hope is in the stock market, right? That's kind of a risky place to put your hope, even though it's doing well right now. You're going to put your hope in some sort of a company, and eventually you're just going to get let down. Some of you are putting your hope in another person, and maybe they just haven't come through for you. Maybe you put your hope in some sort of outcome that you just need, and you could get exactly that thing. It would be so great, but it just hasn't happened yet. The reason is that you're putting your hope in the wrong places. When we put our hope in the wrong places, we start to end up hopeless, and we become a weary world that wonders if there's anything good, because our hope has been in all of the wrong places. You know, I love what Hebrews 10:23 says. It says this. It says, let us hold unswervingly, in other words, not going to the right or to the left, to the hope that we profess. For He is promised and He is faithful. You know, I love that picture. Let us hold on to it. Grab onto it with all of our life. Grab a hold. Those who are Christians, we're supposed to grab a hold of this sort of hope that we profess and never, ever let it go. Don't ever become somebody who doesn't understand the promise that's been left to us. The challenge today is, though, that I believe that there are too many of us who are letting go of that hope like a balloon that is floating off, and we profess that we're grabbing onto it, but really what we're grabbing onto is all of the fear and the anxiety and the darkness of the night. We're letting go of truth of God, and we're hanging on to the lies of the evil one. And really what we need to do is exactly the opposite. We need to let go of the fear. We need to let go of the anxiety. We need to let go of the stress, let go of the panic, let go of the doubt, and hold on to that hope that we profess. We need to hang on to the very promises of God and don't let go. Don't ever lose hope. Hope of what a new day with Christ can bring. Don't lose that hope. I think that may be one of the toughest things to say as we've been sitting here in the midst of 2020. Don't lose hope. Over the past year, suicide rates are up nearly 150% because 2020 has been one of the darkest nights that so many of us have ever experienced. But I want you to hear this. The morning is coming, and with it is new mercies. So don't lose hope. Hold on to that hope that we profess. I'm going to stay here for just a moment because I think that there's somebody out there who really needs to hear this. Don't let go of the hope. Don't give up. Don't surrender. Don't cash it in. Don't, all right? Understand it could be dark for a while, but there is a new day and it's coming and it's amazing. And what a new day in Christ can bring. Don't give up. Don't give up the hope. There is a weary world, yeah. But in the midst of the weariness, there's a thrill of hope. And because of that, the weary world can rejoice. There's a new day that's coming. I'm telling you, a day with Christ can change everything. Oh, if I could just give you anything or say anything to someone that is struggling in this area right now is don't lose hope. Hang on until the morning because a new day with Jesus is coming. And it changes everything. All right. Hopefully you got that. Here's the third thing I want you to see. A new day with Christ, it brings the help that you're seeking. A new day with Christ, it brings the help that you're seeking. Look at verse 26. It says this. It says, it is good to wait. I don't know about you. I'm not a very patient person, right? I like to call ahead to restaurants, usually as I'm driving there so that I can just try to avoid the wait. I check in online to my haircut place so I can avoid the wait. In fact, I get mad at the doctor's office, right? Because they make you have to do what? Wait. In fact, one time we got turned away after driving nearly an hour to a doctor's office and we were 15 minutes late and the office turned us away because we were late. And I was like, really? Really? I guarantee you if I'd have walked in those doors, I was going to sit and wait for an hour or more inside on you guys. I was so mad. But sometimes you just have to wait quietly. And what did Jeremiah say that we're waiting for? He says sometimes you have to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. The what? What in the world is the salvation of the Lord? Well, there's some great stories in the Gospels where we get the life and the stories of Jesus. And this story is about Jesus' best friend, Lazarus. And Lazarus had died. And when Jesus got there, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. He was so dead that, he was smelling bad. In the King James Version, it may have the best description of this. It said, he stinketh, right? And you know that you're dead when you stinketh in the King James Version. 4 days. Everybody had given up hope. And Jesus shows up. He looks at the stone that was covering up the grave, and he says, roll that away. And when they did, then he screams out, he yells into it, and he says, Lazarus, get up, come over here. And Lazarus, I want to tell you, he does exactly that. He comes out of the cave. And that's the difference that one day with Jesus Christ can make. That's the hope. Let me tell you another story. There was a woman. She was suffering for 12 years with an issue of blood. For 12 years. Can you imagine something, the pain, the embarrassment, the humiliation, the torture, even the private suffering of her soul for 12 whole years, every day hoping that this would be the day. Maybe I'll be okay this day, but oh my goodness, I'm still stuck with this. 12 years of agony. And one day she sees Jesus and she reaches out and she touches the hem of his garment. And all of a sudden, she's healed. She'll tell you that the difference that one day with Jesus would make, it made a ton in her own life. How about this one? One man for 38 years, he was born unable to walk, and he was sitting next to the pool of Bethsaida, hoping that one day that the pool would be stirred and that he could stick a toe in there or something and be healed. And Jesus comes up to him, and Jesus looked at him and he said, "Pick up your mat and walk." And after 38 years of being unable to do this, this man gets up and walks. You know what he would tell you? He would tell you it's amazing the difference that one day with Jesus will make. Jesus saved these people from their circumstances. And some of you that are watching right now, you have some circumstances that are in your life. Some of you are sick in your bodies. Maybe someone that you love is sick in their body. And I'm telling you that we serve a God that is able, he is capable of healing. And whether he heals or he doesn't heal the way that we think he should, in the presence of God and his goodness, it is still amazing the difference that one day in Jesus can make. Now, some of you, you need to hear this. You're in the weary world right now. And I want you to be told, I'm going to tell you that there is a thrill of hope that will make your weary world rejoice. That's the new and glorious morning that is coming. And you may be looking at your marriage right now, and you may think, this could never be what it should be. I'm telling you that it's amazing the difference that one day with Jesus Christ can make. Some of you right now are in the middle of the night. Maybe not physically, but spiritually. You're separated from God. You're separated from his light and his warmth and his love, and there is screaming. There's no epidural for you. The baby is coming. The pain is there. The cows are lowing. I don't know what that means. It just sounded good right there. But at the end of the day, what we both understand is that it's not fun. And all of a sudden, in the middle of this weary world and the darkness of the night, you can be reminded. In fact, I am reminding you right now, and you can begin to call this to your mind, that because Jesus was born, you can. And you are able to have hope in the middle of the night. Just because Jesus is here. You have hope in the middle of the night because of Jesus. Because there is a new day with Jesus Christ. I'm telling you, it brings exactly what you need. It may not be what you want, but it's always exactly what you need. And a new day with Christ, it gives you the hope to keep on going. And a new day with Christ can bring you the help that you are seeking. Romans 13, 11, and 12. For some of you, this is going to become your new favorite verse. I know that it really resonated with me this week. It says this. It says, "The hour has come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over, and the day is almost here." So the night is nearly over, and the day is almost here. The night is almost over, and the day is almost here. The night is nearly over, and the day is almost here, because the darkness is about to be defeated. It has been defeated because of the Son of God who came into this earth to bring light. He is the new and glorious morning. And you are nearer to your salvation, to being saved today, than you were a day before. Now, for some of you, that sort of salvation is for your souls. It's not just a matter of circumstances, but it's a soul issue. Because for some of you, you are in the middle of the darkness, and you don't have a relationship with the Son of God. And you need to hear that he is risen, and because he was born into this weary world, that you can have this thrill of hope, and that yonder breaks a new and glorious morning. Maybe that's you right now. And if that is you, then I'm going to invite you to pray with me. Father, I pray in your presence that your Spirit would minister to your people as wherever it is that they're gathered at right now, or wherever it is that they're listening and worshiping, and whatever it is that they're struggling through. God, I pray that every time that we hear this song, that we worship through this song, this Christmas song, that we would be reminded that there's a new day with Christ. And it brings more than we could ever imagine. And God, it's not only a new day that's here on earth, but there's a new day in eternity. Now, for some of you that are with us right now, you're part of our church. If you're part of our church, I'm going to invite you to do something special because we're going to pray for all of those that are in the midst of their darkest nights right now. Maybe you have a loved one that you know is in the midst of a dark moment right now, and they need a new and glorious morning. They need something to break through. They need that salvation from Jesus. I'm going to invite you to pray for them. Maybe you're watching right now. Maybe you've got some sort of circumstance that you need salvation from. Maybe it's drugs, alcohol, maybe it's finances, maybe it's your marriage, maybe it's an emotional thing that's going on. I don't know, but God knows. God understands what it is that you're going through, your midst of your darkest night, and He wants to cut through that and give you a new and glorious morning, a thrill of hope, a salvation from that. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to pray for you. And so if that's you right now, I'm going to invite you to just lift your heart up. You don't have to actually take it out of your body or do something crazy like that, but just inwardly in your spirit, just look down and just open it up and say, God, this is for me, and I'm receiving this right now. Father, I do pray for those that are struggling in the middle of their deep, dark night. God, it may not be the darkest thing they've ever faced, but it might be. They may be living on a hope-deprived existence. I pray right now that you would cut through all of that you would show them the breaking of the dawn, the new and glorious morning that's headed their way. God, that you would step into this and fill them with a thrill of hope in the midst of their weary world, where they're not even sure that they can go on. But God, because of that they can be turned into rejoicing. God, I pray for those that are sick. There's someone in my own world and right now that I'm lifting up to you in my mind, just thinking about them. And God, I pray for just miracles to be done in healing their body. God, I pray the same for that person that's listening right now who needs this and needs that hope instead of despair. God, maybe it's somebody's marriage that's on the rocks and they're not sure that tomorrow they can move forward. God, I pray for them. Pray for one day with Jesus to just change it all. You know, one of the interesting things about this passage that I didn't say earlier is who wrote it. I did tell you that it was a non-Jesus follower. It was somebody who was far from God, who understood this truth. And I don't know the rest of the story. I wish I could come in and tell you that because he wrote this, that his entire life was changed and he became a Jesus follower afterwards. And I don't know if that's true or not. But I do know that if you're sitting there right now, wherever it is that you're at, you're like, you know what? That's what I need. I need one day with Jesus. Let me just tell you something that's better than one day with Jesus. It's every day, a lifetime with Jesus. And Jesus says, listen, here's what I would love for you to do is to just surrender your life to me. Let me just be there in relationship with you. That's what he wants. He wants a relationship with you. And if that's you and you'd say yes to that, here's all you have to do. Yes. That's it. That's all you have to do in order to say yes to Jesus' invitation to have a relationship with him, for him to bring a thrill of hope and to break through the darkest night and to add a new and glorious morning to your life. But if that's you and you say, you know what, that's where I'm at and I want to say yes, I am saying yes. In fact, I did say yes today. Would you let me just rejoice with you over that? Just be excited with you about that. And would you text us and let us know down here, just text the word Jesus follower to the number that's on the screen. And that way we can celebrate with you that Jesus broke through into your night. And he brought a new and glorious morning to your life. And know that he's changing lives. We hear the stories all the time, and you can be one of those too. Father, I thank you that right now, in this moment, there are people who are saying yes to you. God, may we just rejoice in a church over that and continue to be committed to seeing new and glorious mornings in people's lives. We give you all of the honor and the praise. In your name, amen.